deal. Just limit the health that they have to play with as much as possible. So a little bit surprising to see the Apexis Blast variant coming out because, of course, Apexis Blast is a card that doesn't fulfill the quest. It's a very, very good card, but since it does not have a spell school, it can be a little bit awkward if you're going for quest completion specifically, but still, obviously a generically very strong card to play in a deck that plays no minions.
Yeah, and just expensive, right, for that deck.
Yes.
It feels pretty, because you're not playing masks or anything like you used to in Spell Mage, for example. Right. So yeah, it feels pretty expensive. We're just already diving into mulligans. I think RDU, I didn't quite catch the mulligan, but I don't think it was anything too spicy. So an easy throwaway for him. And Casie now, with this Quest Shaman, I know it depends on sort of aggressive minion lineups versus slower combo decks, but in this matchup, what is Casie looking for? Like, what is the route to victory with this Quest Shaman against Mage?
It's tough. I've experimented with this matchup a little bit, and you know, my number one conclusion is, man, this sucks. I don't want to play this anymore. But my auxiliary conclusions, there's kind of two ways you can do it, right? You can have a very aggressive board start. If you're playing Earth Elemental in your deck, cheating out an Earth Elemental nice and early is very good because it kind of demands back-to-back-to-back freezes from your opponent, which usually aren't there, he hesitates to say. But outside of that, you're looking for just very aggressive minion curves early on, or very aggressive overload chains early on so you can get to turbo Bru'kan, and then you try and set up some kind of burst win condition in the end, right?
Yeah. 100% agree, and I've just been chuckling at RDU's little face because he had flow ready to go. It just makes me laugh, the smirks. Already though, Casie, even though he's just seen the flow, not doing too bad, right? He has a lot of the cards to pop these overloads whenever he really wants at this point, and it looks like he is going to go off with the Entrap Sorceress.
Yes, I love the guidance meta with this deck, where it is quite literally cast guidance, don't look at what the spells are, and just click pick both. Like, he got Wind Fury Hex. Like, Wind Fury might get some work done. Hex is absolute trash. And still, he just picked both in a heartbeat because you're really just playing that card to overload for you and progress your quest in a lot of situations.
Exactly. You only get it if you do pick those both options, so it's the way you want to go. RDU committing a fireball just to try and slow the game down, and it is something that it's that flow weakness, I guess. If you're playing flow on 3, you're often not doing too much on 2 either, which means any minions played in the early game, get those hits in. And as Mage, we even saw it in APAC, I think, right? Where, was it Glory who's playing Spice Bread in his Mage? Because there's no health recovery outside of exactly Ice Barrier in the deck, so it's very difficult when you take this early aggression damage.
That's right. I was looking at his hand thinking that the Spice Bread was going to win the game, and then it ended up just having such an insane pop-off turn with the quest.
He just killed him instead.
He just killed him instead. Yeah, it was great. Enjoyed it. Nice curve from Casie here. Picks up the Stewart and then hits the 1 overload on the Feral Spirit this turn, which means he'll have a 4-mana turn next turn. Perfect for dropping the 4/4. Hopefully he can pick up a nice juicy overload card from that again, because he is running dry on cards to progress his quest line right now.
Yeah, and just as I was about to say, would you agree that RDU's plan on holding at least one of these fire sales and not trading it away? Because I feel like it's one of the very good cards in these early sort of semi-aggro board-based decks like this Quest Shaman is.
Yeah, agreed. Especially since they're so cheap, they both got the flow discount, so he's able to maintain that cheap cost in hand and actually have access to, very soon he'll be able to do things like Fire Sale plus Ping plus First Flame or plus Brain Freeze, right, to really pick apart some boards with different health totals on it. So I think, yeah, it's a pretty good choice for him overall. Casie just loading up on charged calls right now. He is ready to pop off at a moment's notice.
Yeah, what are they actually at right now?
They're on 5, which is actually the perfect number for Casie to have them on right now. 5's actually better than 6's in a lot of situations. This is a dynamic that shifts because it's Discover. Any card that says Discover on it, you can't get cards from other classes, right? So that limits the pool of what's available. If you look at 5 drops for Shaman specifically, Anara, insane. Raz, insane. Earth Elemental, insane. Like, the 5-drop pool is just the absolute nuts for Shaman.
Yeah, completely agree. And this is one of the things that does interest me a lot about the deck, is how different players use Charge Call, because you can just go for the 5s. Like, Casie could go for the 5s next turn, but he could also think, oh, well, my board's already pretty chunky right now, or at least at this second in time. Like, maybe I wait and try and do a little bit more, but I think with 3 and a diligent note taker, there's a chance that Casey's like, I will make endless waves of minions, and you have to deal with them.
6 mana. If this isn't double charge cool, I'll be amazed. Doesn't hit any of the juicy shamans, but a nice 5/5 will do just fine. Whiffs on them twice, actually. A little bit disappointing there for Casie, I'm sure. But still, you can see in terms of raw stats, right? Like, you wouldn't be underwhelmed if you got these minions off 2 6-drop summons either. So, in general, it's just 5 drops are just very high reward, very low risk right now with the way that the stats are broken down.
That's just very close to a very good Jandis, right? You don't get the 2-1, but you don't get the weakness either. It's just a solid Jandis turn, right? You got more control over it. And of course, later on with Bru'kan, things get very silly with multiple charge calls. Like,
indeed.
Here though, RDU is doing the painful thing you have to do as Mage sometimes, and that's cast Cram Session before you've completed the quest, which dramatically reduces the card draw available once you play Dawn Grasp. So it's been forced into this, and it didn't turn out too bad with the Tarantula coming out there of the... Yeah, that's not too bad, is it? Runedorb? Do you think he just pushes it, or do you think he has to hold on right now?
Like he's holding on. I think the big loss there for RDU is that he didn't find an additional frost spell off the draw there, because then he could have completed immediately if he'd have picked up a Brain Freeze or something, because he's only 1 frost spell away from Dawn Grasp right now. He does have Ice Barrier in hand, but of course that would now be his whole turn this turn if he chooses to go for that.
Oh, okay. He goes for that now, right? He has the water. I was just going to say the big drawback of, say, not going for it, or the reason to, is just, like I mentioned, lack of card draw. He already used the card draw earlier on, so now he just can't go for it. But with that refreshing spring water, looking pretty good. RDU is fairly safe right now, and Casie looks like he's just running just a little bit dry.
This Wind Fury is also doing some work here. This is a lot of damage, actually, because Casie can Diligent Note Taker, Lightning Bloom to get 4 overloaded crystals, right? And then Wind Fury, push all that damage face, and he has the tradable overdraft as well. I just don't think it's quite going to get there. So yeah, cycles it away, looking for something a little bit better this turn. Perpetual Flame, I believe he's 1 out of 3. Yes, 1 out of 3 on stage 2. So Perpetual Flame will help him to complete this quest.
Oh, okay. Good order in there. If it would have hit the Dawn Grasp, it wouldn't have carried on, of course. It requires to kill a minion.
Just the double Wind Fury with the Note Taker instead. Okay.
I didn't really mention it, but the Ogremancer is actually a bit of a pain for RDU, right? To actually get to these minions. Even a 2/2 in the way just kind of nullifies this Dawn Grasp to an extent as well. Was he going to trade into Dawn Grasp? Oh no, okay. That was just a weird... It looked like he... Oh, he is. Okay, yeah, he is. I'm a little bit surprised. I think I would have left that up if I was Casie.
I mean, it's very scary, right? It's one of those things that's easy to say when you're in the position, not in the position where it's your game at stake, but it makes it so much easier to hit the lethal the next turn, I think, overall.
Yeah, I guess. It just would have been awkward with the Ogre making taunts, right? Like, it's kind of a weird thing to... True. To actually get the Dawn Grasp to hit face, whereas now there's just a load of 0/2s on the board that RDU can almost ignore.
It's fair. I think there would have been a way to manipulate it quite easily. If the trade didn't happen, you just kind of shoot a spell at the Totem Golem first, to explode it, fill the board up, right? And then you can probably find an interval where you cast 1 spell to clear the minion and then go face. But regardless, none of that actually ended up mattering, because despite the lack of 7/7 on the board actually attacking, RDU was still able to secure the lethal there. And you still saw that Incantus Flow is an incredibly powerful card, still at 3 mana. RDU got the first one on curve, which was great, got the second one to line up perfectly into his pop-off turn for the lethal at the end, which you are now going to watch again. And in the end, this is just Quest Mage 101, right? Like, control the board, deal the burst damage, and despite how aggressive Casey's opening was, I mean, it was a little bit slow to start, but then he was able to start popping off with Charge Call into big minions very early.
Right.
Just wasn't enough, and this is why we describe this as quite a poor matchup for the Quest Shaman overall.
Yeah, and it was pretty fortunate, like I said, for RDU. The turn that he went for Dawngrass, but could have gone for Dawngrass, should I say, with that Ice Barrier, he did get the Spring Water in hand that turn, so he had the knowledge that the card draw follow-up was there. Then he got into the, as we just saw at the beginning of this clip here, this replay, he got the second Cram Session super quick as well, whereas if those were whiffed, which does happen, the game becomes a little bit more difficult and he can't just kill Casie, and then things have to be looked at. Does he just spend a turn fire sailing and just doing a couple of other things? But yeah, he did get hold of the card draw, and if there's flow being played and card draw and Dawngrasp, well, that's when games end. We are moving quickly on though. Casie looks like he's jumping over to this Face Hunter for now, and RDU of course going to be sticking on the Mage because we are playing last hero standing, which means Shaman is gone for Casie now. He lost with it, so he loses it, and now he's going to go onto this Hunter to try and take down the Mage, and a much better matchup in my opinion, Soto.
Agreed, yes. This is a throwback to last meta where the equivalent Mage deck versus what was basically this exact same Hunter was a miserable matchup for the Mage overall, and really not a lot has changed. I think a lot of the matchup cruxes on an early Ice Barrier, like an on-curve Ice Barrier from the Mage, because even if they get Ice Barrier later on in the game, Hunter then just has the liberty to ignore it, right? So you need to get the Ice Barrier down early enough that Casie will still feel like he needs to attack with minions to win the game and therefore chew through that Ice Barrier. Whereas if you get it on turn 6, turn 7, something like that, there's a good chance you're already at 5, 6, 7, 8 health at that point, and the Ice Barrier just becomes completely irrelevant because you're just dying to aim shots and hero powers and piercing shots and whatever else.
I was going to say, I actually think it's got better for the Hunter because of aim shot that you mentioned, right? Like, aim shot allows them to ignore the later Ice Barriers even more often because it just naturally deals so much damage without having to worry about it.
And just to get very deep into the Ice Barrier interaction, that gets even better than you might first think, because when you factor in Barak, then that Ice Barrier becomes a huge factor, right? Because previously, you used to draw a 1/2/3 spell, and your 3 spell would be Mancrick's Wife all the time, which would then activate the Ice Barrier that your opponent has in play, which is a huge, huge deal that you generally don't want to do. Now, instead of drawing the Enraged Mancrick, most of the time you just draw 6 damage that doesn't have to interact with Ice Barrier, so it's an even bigger swing.
Yeah, and Casie here has the what I would call like the good curve for Hunter, which is all the minions now, and then especially with the pickup of Barak Kodabane, as you were just talking about, he has all the spells to finish the game. So it's in like the absolute correct order you want. Even the aim shot is just a reasonable filler turn. You're going to see, what, 7 push from minions this turn? He could. Let's see on the draw. Oh, we got tracking.
The forbidden 6 damage Felmore Raven. That's how you know you're in a good spot.
Actually, kind of like quick shot here. There's Warpatinga hero power this turn, which fills out the turn nicely. But I think if he picks up quick shot and then just plays aim shot, okay, he's going to make it last a little bit longer. I think all the options were decent, honestly. This does just, I guess, the maximum, most efficient damage with the turn.
This does not appear to be getting there. He does have the flurry this turn. Does RDU to be able to freeze out the 6/4. I think if he took another 6 damage from the, or another 5 damage even from the Felmore, he'd be in serious trouble.
Yeah, and you can see what RDU's even committing, right? Coin, just to kill a 1/1 effectively, right? Just so he can flurry this 5/4. That's a lot of resources when looking at his hand. It's just not doing it right now.
Alright, Pex's Blast off the top does create a little bit of a counter swing at least, but that is just 3 more damage, make that 4 more damage, make that 7 more damage, make that 11 more damage.
It's already too much, right? It's already too much.
Already too much.
Aim shot, quick shot, hero power next turn is just going to be game. Wow.
Yep.
And RDU probably has an inkling after seeing Barak, of course, knowing that there's only so many specific outcomes.
Yeah, well, he's guaranteed, right? Because it's literally just the aim shot that he needs to end the game from here. So RDU will know that this one has gone, and we are off to a lightning start, as you might have expected from a game involving these 2 players.
Yeah, and this is where it does get tricky, though, because both players have such similar lineups. Because RDU won game 1 with this Mage, then yes, Casey's counter-queued him, but now do you think RDU just gains a further advantage because he's like a deck ahead, right? So he can choose, say, for example, the shaman to go against Casie's hunter and then still have the hunter in the back pocket.
Yeah, it's certainly an option, and probably the option that I would prefer going into this. It's, again, one of those reasons where I was kind of questioning the opening with Quest Shaman, because it did feel like a decent queue into a couple of the matchups that you could force it into deliberately, and having that option available to you seemed kind of appealing. But honestly, Last Hero Standing sometimes goes deeper than that, right? And you might break down a matchup chart on a series and say, well, even if I hold back my Quest Shaman and I counter queue X with it, they just then queue Mage into my Quest Shaman, and like, what has my Quest Shaman really achieved at that point? So maybe if I just throw it out first, I can pick up a sneaky win with it in a matchup that RDU just wasn't expecting in the pattern, and then maybe I can get an advantage in the series that way. There's definitely a lot of different ways to look at it in Last Hero Standing.
Yeah, and even probably the less liked reasoning is sometimes you go, yeah, this is going to be a little bit awkward because the startings are so difficult in Last Hero Standing. Maybe I queue Quest Shaman and need it to win. And if I do get that win, regardless of what it's against, I am suddenly super favored in the matchup because then there's the Hunter and Mage as responses to the opposite Hunter and Mage. So it's just going to kind of interesting to see how that does play out, and we're going to be seeing it all weekend. So look forward to that. But no surprise there, RDU jumping to that Quest Shaman Sottle, and we've got a few players bringing Earth Elemental in the list a little bit later on today. But have you had much experience with the Spirit Alpha kind of build with the slightly just lower curve?
This is what I tried out kind of day one, day two, when I was just cycling through as many decks as possible, just trying to try out the fresh meta. I think this is one of the first lists that came out for Quest Shaman. But over time, I've kind of gravitated towards Earth Elemental a little more. I don't know how much of that is I've been, watching Fino stream quite a bit, and it genuinely does seem like every time he plays Earth Elemental, the game ends. But it does give you that insane high roll opening of like double Bloom Earth Elemental or like Bloom Coin Earth Elemental and another Overload spell to really refresh those crystals, and you unlock 6-7 mana crystals overall off the Overload in the end, which is huge. So I think it does create a lot of high roll potential, but at the same time you can do those same turns with the Spirit Alpha, right? Where if you have a bunch of Lightning Balloons in your opening hand, you can do something very similar, except it's distributed stats instead of consolidated stats that you end up creating. So, different strokes for different folks. I'm sure there's matchup concerns as well, where each is individually different. But we shall see in this one, because this is, I would say, one of the trickier anti-aggro matchups for Quest Shaman to cope with, because in a lot of other anti-aggro matchups, you force them off board, you draw the card Perpetual Flame, and the game ends, right? They just don't have board anymore, and they can't win. Face Hunter isn't necessarily limited by those factors, because they can get their board cleared and switch to Rhino plan, switch to damage plan, switch to a different variety of ways to end the game. So I think this is a decent matchup for Quest Shaman, but I don't think it's one of the blowout matchups that Quest Shaman certainly does have in the meta right now.
Yeah, good opening here for RDU though, just grabbing hold of that board easily. And this is one of the openings. This is why people play the deck, right? You can have these incredible turn ones, and because of the nature of the quest unlocking those crystals for you, you're not even overly punished, apart from maybe lacking of cards in the opening hand. But in terms of having mana locked, you're just not really. So as you can see now, RDU is going to open up all that mana with that quest completion, and Casey's just facing down what should really be a turn 3 turn as opposed to a turn 2.
Yeah, I think he'll be slightly pleased, I should say, that this was Parappa the Zapper and not a Lightning Bolt, for example. So he still at least gets to keep his Initiate on the other side.
You just say Parappa the Zapper.
I did.
I've not heard that before, and it's hilarious. Thank you. So used to being called Zappy Boy that that just caught me off guard. Sorry, carry on.
Because at least that way he got to fight back against the board a little bit, right? By taking some decent trades. Well, not that far behind, all things considered, whereas I think a Bolt would have limited his options a lot more.
Yeah, those opening turns can actually just end games in this kind of matchup, whereas this was recoverable for Casie, especially with that aim shot in there as well. That's a pretty flexible card in terms of picking off minions, and especially the shaman minions as well. Like, a lot of them are 3 health, so he has those emergency removal tools while still pushing damage with that buffed hero power.
And this is what I mean, right? Like, he's lost board. Casie can see he's lost board. He's not an idiot. He has eyes. He can understand that. But from the position that he's in, he has a very resource-based hand with Barracuda Bane and with Warsong Wrangler, and that allows him to switch to Rhino Plan instead, right? And force enormous amounts of damage from off-board while controlling the board with the Rhino. Having picked up the Dream... I actually didn't notice. He was guaranteed that, right? Because he had both...
Yeah, double aim shot, yeah.
So actually, that does allow him to actually fight very aggressively back against board, which increases his options even further now. He's actually in a very, very good position because of the guaranteed factor on that Mankrik.
And checking this out, RDU does have... is he going to go for it? Yeah, okay. He does have the devolving missiles. He could have gone maximum risk and just played it first, but I think it's reasonable to trade here, especially because he does have some level of follow-up.
Shake of the head from Casie, not happy with what was a very good outcome, I would say, there for RDU. But still in reasonable shape here overall, I would say. Basically very upset though.
Still surprises me to see Lightning at 3, just flat across the board.
Yeah. So every time someone plays it against you, you high roller. What do you mean like, 3 on everything?
Yeah, it's just two. It's one of those cards that, because of the nature of the card in many previous years of Hearthstone, it's just ingrained into me that it deals 2 or 3.
Yeah. Oh,
dodged. Okay.
That's a draw. He's going to go for straight 7-drop this turn. It should be so much stronger than anything else he can do here.
Oh. Sure. Vanguard. Get a Rhino through that.
There is still a 0-1 totem on the board, though, which is a very big deal. Casie does not, in fact, have to get a Rhino through that. This damage is going to start ramping up quickly. This is going to be a fairly close race overall, I would imagine, with just how much straight damage Casie has in play.
He can isolate the Bone Chewer as well, right? He can Rhino, he can play the...
Wound Prey?
Yeah, he can play Wound Prey. I was just looking at the cards he had on offer. Yeah, he can play Wound Prey to just guarantee this turn. And he just isolates the Bone Chewer and just has to kind of rely on RDU just not having much of a follow-up, to be honest, because if there's more where that came from, he needs to be a little bit afraid.
Yeah. Spell was cast previous turn with the charge call, so RDU can dip again.
Ooh.
Interesting.
Oh, 1 mana off having a really powerful turn here.
Mm-hmm. Still 0 from 2 on his final Bru'kan reward. So Perpetual Flame is a little bit scary maybe to be that overloaded on the following turn, but does seem significantly better than the other options. Looks like he's just going to clear up. Take the 3 overload.
Yeah, it's reasonable. It hurts a little bit to reduce this down to, well, I guess a 7-3 now. So it's not going to be like the card that wins the game, but he's definitely not losing the game right now. Especially with the Spirit Alpha, if he can just dig his way out of this overload issue he's got at this moment in time.
Yeah, it does open up the piercing shot here, though, which is a big deal. Casie going to skip hero power for the Neophyte. So he has 6 damage from aim shots plus 6 from a hero power next turn. Which would be 12 damage total. So even pushing the 2 extra wouldn't have set up lethal. So yeah, I think the security of the Neophyte was probably a better decision.
We might get to see the most glorious thing in Hunter right now, which is 2 aim shots before pressing hero power. Oh, so much damage.
Suddenly this is a race it feels like Casey's winning, right?
Yeah, he's going to double aim shot hero power, then have quick shot hero power next turn.
Mm-hmm. Depends on whether this last draw is 1-off lethal. But he does have potential to dump his... He has a potential top deck plus a small potential of being able to dump his hand plus draw a card with quick shot on the following turn.
So if RDU plays Bru'kan now, he has double lightning bolt face effectively. But most importantly for the race, he needs to just rely on not dying next turn, and then he has a 7/7 with lightning bolts, right? Like,
that's right.
And now a dunk tank. He has won next turn if Casie doesn't kill him. Very, very close game at this point. And remember, there aren't that many damage draws for Casie.
Wait, Polkar, Pack Runner, Demon Companion into charge is lethal now, right?
Yep.
Because he can rush twice. Oh, it doesn't get it.
can he clear? Only 2 minions, right?
Mm-hmm.
So he's, let me count, Omega dead. Yep.
Gosh.
Double lightning bolt, double dunk tank, and that is going to be the game. And Casey's unhappy with that one. And I can understand why, but it's important also to remember how many damage spells he actually got early game, right? Those double aim shots we talk about, the Barak Kodobane was played, which then pulls a quick shot and so on. He already played one of the Wound Praise as well, so there was a lot of burn damage he already had played in that game. I'm just quickly checking now. Okay, he does play 2 Wound Praise, because I know some players have actually dropped down to 1 there, but still, I think like a lot of that burn damage was actually already gone.
I think he did use both Wound Praise in that game.
Oh, did he? Did I miss the first one?
I think one went face early on while we were debating plays, right? And then one was used to trade into minions when he lost board. I think. I'm not 100% confident on that, but he had outs for sure. Like second Rhino was lethal, right? Because it's buffed and it could have just gone straight into the Taunt Totem.
Sure.
He had Piercing Shot. Like he had a few outs in that position for sure. And even we saw a niche out here, right, with the charge minion coming out from Demon Companion ended up being lethal as well. But I think if you want to reflect on it honestly, you have to go right back to turn 1, right, and say that, yeah, Casie drew a whole bunch of damage spells, but that would have been a really nice draw for him because he had that draw that you've been talking about, which is 2 or 3 minions into all your damage. It just so happened that RDU just had one of those nutso turn 1, turn 2 openings for Shaman, which just blew him off the board straight away and meant that he could not get any early damage in, so he just kind of had to switch to damage efficiency in the mid game with Rhinos and damage spells. And I said it was looking like a very, very close race, and it absolutely was in the end, coming down to 1 damage and a single top deck for Casie really could have made all the difference.
And yeah, remember, there was that whole turn, right, where, yes, Rhino pushed damage on that turn, killing off a, I think it was a 1 health minion or 2 health, but basically Casie lost so much damage because of the Bone Chewer and how wide that board already was, right? Yep. Outside of the Rhino overkill, there was no other minions that could go face, even though we had like 3 or 4 to attack with. So a little bit of a rough one there for Casie, and now he's got his own Mage going up against the Shaman of RDU.
Yeah, and so we can just run back what we talked about earlier, right? Because it's a very similar story this time around. This is kind of the dynamic I was talking about before, where I was saying, well, this is part of what influenced Casie to lead Shaman, is this kind of dynamic, which is how much work does Shaman actually do in the mid-series anyway? I talked about this a lot last season, previous Last Hero Standings seasons, where if your deck is a 1-win deck on average, it's really not doing that much in the series, right? Like, decks going 1-1 overall is really not what you're looking for. You're looking for like 1.5 win decks overall, and maybe Quest Shaman struggles to do that in the lineup that Casey's dealing with. So now we're going to potentially see that coming into play, where even though RDU picked up a win in slightly fortunate circumstances for himself with that Shaman, he now has to run it back into a very rough matchup on the other side.
Yeah, the benefit is, though, even if he takes a loss here, RDU then has his Hunter.
Exactly.
Going to Casey's Mage, which is the big one, and the one that Casey's going to have to pull out all the stops. But of course, to do that, he needs to get past the Shaman first. Let's get into it. Opening hand there for RDU does not look too shabby post-mulligan. The early guidance and a Perpetual Flame maybe not the best, but at least he has that charge call to maybe get something out a little bit soon.
I wondered whether the spell might get broken, right? Now it doesn't cost 2 anymore. I thought the era of Mr. Blue Card in European GM might be over, but there's no sign of it. It's just continuing to be every single game.
Yep, Flow's not just for Christmas, it's for life.
Vivid Spores is a card I immediately want to talk about in Quest Shaman.
I know you do, because you talked to me about it before we even started the show.
Yeah, I think this card is the absolute nuts. In terms of like opening a box and finding an option that's not in your deck, I think Vivid Spores is usually the nuts. We've seen it be incredibly oppressive in some of the APAC games, where I think Bank Yugi made that ludicrous looking board. Gia was referring it quite rightly as Cube Shaman at that point because of how difficult to deal the board states were. But even pre-quest completion against Mage, it's a particularly powerful card to have, right? Because Mage is the class that doesn't necessarily clear your board, they just stall your board. They freeze it out, they leave it there, they say, I'll deal with it next turn. If you can't suddenly have this gotcha card that's like, well, now you can't deal with it next turn. Screw your fire sale, right? My board is just coming back straight away. I think that can be a really, really big deal if Casie does get into that position where he's just having to freeze minions.
Yeah, already though, speaking of fire sale, Casey's clearing off the initial push from RDU, followed up with the second flow. So Casey's pretty much as powerful as you're ever going to be in this matchup at this point anyway. So he's got the world ahead of him here, but it's RDU's job to pile on the pressure once again. He's going to complete the quest and get that Fireheart down with 3 mana to spare.
Takes Revolve just to cycle. Okay, I mean, Shock's pretty good. Insta guidance, insta don't look, insta pick both. Investment opportunity to follow it all up as well. Wow. That was a pretty insane Fireheart.
And in case you're wondering at home, Fireheart, if she does die, the effect continues, as you can probably guess. That is okay, that's allowed to happen, it's meant to happen, it's how it's happened all the time, so don't be thrown off by that and the fact that he revolved the minion that looks like it's giving him this keep going there with the spell effects.
Yeah, RDU choosing to dump a lightning bolt there just to play around hand size issues because of the shark, potentially giving him 2 extra coins this turn. Obviously, investment opportunity would have drawn a card and generated another card from the Fireheart, meaning he would have had some pretty serious hand size issues at that point.
And the shot's kind of crazy, isn't it? It's kind of like overload without the drawback. You just get to spend the mana. Vivid Spores pass. Give me the coins.
The storm is in me.
RDU chooses to upgrade his charge call from 6 to 7 here, which is also generally an improvement, I would say.
Is he going Keymaster? Oh yeah.
He is, yeah.
It's kind of like Flow. Ooh, not the card he wanted though.
Keymaster Alabaster's like, I'm afraid I've got some bad news. RDU, your opponent drew fire sale this time.
Yep. I'm pretty certain Casey's going to respect this Keymaster. Didn't really want to be giving RDU like 1 and 0 mana spells at this point to mess around with. Or 1 mana spells, I guess.
That's the business right there. Get him with the Inara.
He would overdraw 1 as well if he kills this shark, right?
I honestly feel like Casie cares less about forcing overdraw than he does about RDU having like some sick pop-off turn with a load of coins. I think that was the motivation last turn for sure, but Casey's changed direction this time around. Oh, it does burn the Feral Spirit, which is actually a very useful card to have alongside Vivid Spores in hand.
Yeah, I think the trade-off might have been there is he didn't want to freeze it because Flurry's pretty good in this matchup later on.
Yeah.
And if he doesn't freeze it, he doesn't really want it to just kill Inara either. So I think the trade-off was just dumping the damage into it there. But there's Bru'kan, and guess what? RDU's got the coin to be able to get it out this turn.
Yeah, and this is precisely what you're afraid of when you're trying to limit the coins going into your opponent's hand, right? Is exactly this kind of turn where things just get accelerated.
And you mentioned Vivid Spores. I feel like it's your favorite card ever right now. So what's RDU looking for to activate that card, right? What is he actually looking to draw to make this work? Because it's not like right now he's able to play a bunch of minions. And the deck generally isn't able to play a bunch of minions that consistently.
No, Feral Spirits is certainly the big one. It's why I reacted to that card being burned off the top. So I think that was a very, very big deal, particularly post-quest, right? Like 7 mana, 1 Feral Spirits, 1 Vivid Spores, GG, you know, like that you are not dealing with that board. But I think, as we saw from Bank Yugi, the other way to do it is just with giant charge call minions, right? And just set up that kind of obnoxious board state instead.
Case is saying, right, you had your good turn, here's mine. And again, refreshing spring water in his hand at the top there, which means he can follow up this pressure with even more burn potentially. But RDU with a card draw of his own. Oh, this is like your typical wizard battle, isn't it? Just throwing just elemental spells in each other's faces till one of them falls over. It's kind of great.
8 + 6, 14. So if the Marsh Spawn could discover 7... Oh, hang on, that makes a big difference. He now has
8 mana
10
to play
from the
with.
dunk tanks, 8 from the lightning bolt. That's 18. Marsh Spawn we're taking down to 3 mana. Lightning Bloom we're taking back up to 7. So he's probably just going to be a little bit short of any actual lethal outs in this position. So I imagine we will be seeing the Tidal Surge that RDU was leaning towards at the start of the turn in order to clean up here and get some healing.
Yeah, for a split second I did say he had Torrent available, but of course Tidal Surge is basically Torrent, but it heals you at this point with Bru'kan already down.
Bloom's got to come down here for sure.
Well, 0 mana Phoenix isn't too shabby either. The game might well not continue that long, but if it does, RDU will just win.
Casey's facial expressions this series have been next level. I have enjoyed them immensely. Alright, he's going in. Ignite is in, Fireball is in, Spring Water is coming out. Let's see what the deck has for him. He needs a cram session. Doesn't look like he's Oh, hang on. There an out with the Runed Orb? Is there an out with the Runed Orb? Casey looks happy about something. Nope, he looks miserable about something again. Can't
A
read
roller coaster of emotions, so
Didn't get there.
you can go Ring Toss. He does have Ice Barrier active, right? Because RDU's got no mana.
True.
With the minion down, maybe he goes Oasis Ally. I didn't actually see what he picked. He picked Mirror Entity, actually. He knows there is a spell damage minion in hand for RDU. RDU's only got the 1 mana.
Bloom off the top? That is not Bloom off the top. It does look like there is going to be one more draw here. RDU just goes through the motions, nothing else he can do this turn, and that is an ignite off the top for Casie, which means despite his machinations throughout this game, he was able to just about get over the line there with that ignite top deck. And yeah, I think roller coaster of emotions, as you said a few seconds ago, Raven, is absolutely the way to describe not only our commentary there, but Casey's facial expressions and gestures throughout that one as well, because he was going through the ringer for sure.
It was so close, wasn't it? We said, I even mentioned that maybe the game doesn't even go 1 or 2 more turns. It did. Casey didn't have the massive card draw you can get where you end up basically filling your hand as Mage, but the heal there from the double tidal wave from RDU as well. There you go. You showed how much of a big deal it is, right? You just healed for 10 against Mage that is trying to burn you down. It's a huge deal, but I think the big problem RDU had there was, look how overloaded he is going into the next turn. He didn't have any card to overdraft, I think, to actually unlock all the overload again and go. So it was a really, really rough secondary turn for RDU there.
Yeah, and that's, I guess, something that I do want to try and fit in here. Again, this is very much like trying to cast Blyes, is that the players play at such a rapid pace, it's kind of hard to break down decisions in the moment because you're moving on so quickly. But that turn where RDU did overload so heavily, I think is justifiable, and this isn't a criticism of that line of play because he was fishing for assorted lethal outs in that position, right? Because he had so much mana available to him that turn with doubled Lightning Bloom. However, there is also the line of play that says don't commit all of that overload, right? Like stop your turn at the point where he could have just lifestealed twice on the 7/7 and then say kill me, right? Because if he doesn't kill you from that point, you have such a board built up and then so much potential damage in hand the next turn from all those guidance boxes and so on that you're opening, right? That you'll probably be able to end the game next turn yourself. As it stands, because he fished so aggressively for the lethal in the first place, he was never going to have a 2-turn lethal because he just skipped his next turn, essentially. Which, again, is reasonable, right? Because he's betting on, I need to win the game this turn because I could just die next turn.
Right.
On the side, right? Which is entirely reasonable if there's a cram session in hand, because I believe that was a double flow game overall, right? So you will probably explode if your opponent draws cram session. But there's certainly a decision point there as to how deep you wanted to go, whether or not in theory you did have that one extra turn that you could then play around with.
Yeah, 100%. And it's a really tough choice to make in the moment as well, when we've all just died to one mage spell, right? Because there's so many of them that do the damage post-quest. But this does mean we are going to game number 5. It doesn't feel like it, because I feel like I blinked and we're already nearly finished this full series of games. But RDU is going to be on this Face Hunter now, going up against Mage. And we saw how unfun that was when the roles were reversed a little bit earlier in this series. So very, very good matchup for Hunter. Not unwinnable by Mage, of course, as there aren't really any matchups that's the case. Mage can, if it can survive in the early game, you can just pop off and burn the Hunter down, right? So there's a chance for Casie here, but generally speaking, it's probably like the worst matchup for Mage, at least in my experience.
Okay, Casey's looking at the hand and saying, well, can't really do much better than that. But yeah, I completely agree. Like, in my experience, I think this is a harder matchup for Mage than it is for D6 Warlock, right? Because at least D6 Warlock has some healing that you can draw, right? Good control cards in the early game that you can pick apart boards with and restore some health. And then you can just pop off on turn 5 or turn 6, deal, 12 to 14-ish damage to yourself, all things considered, after maybe a couple of soul fragments and a bit more healing, and just have that I will kill you next turn if you don't have like 12, 14 damage in hand right now. And guess what? They don't have 12, 14 damage in hand. They can do a lot, but they can't do that much.
I wish.
Yeah.
I wish Hunter was like other decks where if you don't kill them, you die. But not really the case right now. I completely agree. And also, the D6 Warlock can just win on board, right? They just have the board and win that turn because of Hunter's not very strong point of being able to fight back. But here,
you get a free win against every Face Hunter on ladder if you just tempo Stealer of Souls, because no self-respecting Face Hunter has ever killed a Stealer of Souls. They all think they're too good for that.
No, I understand. I got that bad boy on curve and hope there's not his mate coming down next turn. Here though, RDU has a decent opening. The pacing shot can be a little bit slow right now, especially against Mage. You have to generate your own minion, typically, to be able to get value from pacing shot. But the Fellhound's there, right? And that's, I think, the big one. We spoke about Fellhound kind of coming back into Hunter after the expansion, because right at the beginning, people were cutting it for some of the other tools, but even if you count it as 2 mana deal 5, especially against a deck like Mage where it almost always hits face, then that is a worthwhile card in Hunter.
Casie has Flow into step 1 quest completion with Brain Freeze here, which will of course draw him a card, which could be nutty here, having hit the double Flow discount. Well, it's whether he thinks he can really afford to do it here.
Yeah, I like this a lot, because then the majority of the board can clean up with Fire Sale next turn. Because you're expecting RDU to play spells, probably have a wide board with this Cold Card Pack Runner. It's now a 3/4, by the way. It costs 1 more mana, of course, but let's make a difference in this Fire Sale turn next turn.
Hit 2 very clunky spells. I know it's ridiculous to call a 3 mana Apexis Blast clunky, but it kind of is in this situation. Like, the nuts there were kind of like Ice Barrier off the top, right? If he drew Ice Barrier off his quest completion reward, he had 1 mana left, double discounted, he could have just jammed Ice Barrier there just in perfect time, got another Frost Tick on step 2 of the quest line, and just with about enough time left, got that extra health from the Ice Barrier, but now any of that stuff is probably just going to be too late.
Well, there's Ice Barrier. That's what you wanted, Sol. I will say, though, I loved the piercing shot there from RDU. He took the moment where he had a 1 health minion around. He used the piercing shot. Now suddenly he has aim shot, hero power, quick shot, hero power in 2 turns. Basically putting Casie on a clock right now.
Casie just says, give me all of the Ice Barriers.
It's rough, though, because, like, 11 is probably the health where Hunter just doesn't have to care anymore.
Exactly, yeah.
And I imagine this is going to be pretty simple. Aim shot, hero power, quick shot, hero power, go.
Yeah, and I think you see the little nod of acknowledgement there from Casie, like, yeah, all right, can't beat that. If he had to attack with minions this game, maybe I could win, but there's just no way on earth he's going to beat that.
If only Casie had the glory tech, maybe things could be different.
That's a good point, actually. The old hot bakes.
Yeah. It's the kind of matchup it's for, to be honest, because I don't think many players are banning Mage, and I think many players are bringing Hunter. So Yeah. Casie just going fishing for just anything in the world where RDU's just got minions. But we can see that it's going to be game, and that is going to be the series. RDU takes down Casie 3-2. Very back and forth series, as we would expect with an almost mirrored lineup. And it's just the benefit of having that final counter Q option available to him, right? Like that, he sort of reaped the reward for getting ahead in the series.
Yeah, that first hit on the Q order of getting, what was it, Mage into Quest Shaman, first game around, was a huge deal for RDU, because then no matter which way you slice down kind of a mirrored lineup series, which has the same ban as well, that's always going to pan out in your favor at that point, right? Like you are then almost demanding that your opponent wins an unfavorable from that point to actually reverse the series. And honestly, the series just kind of panned out in the expected way, right? Where every matchup that was favored for one kind of went in that direction. And so, overall, just pretty solid series of last hero standing. And these two players will, I think, be fairly happy with their lineups overall, having brought various basically mirrored lineups and then both making it to stream. It's just unfortunate for the two players that they then have to face each other, right? And only one of them can go through. But it does mean, yet again, I think this RDU Gabby narrative is going to be something that we might just be looking at more and more throughout the course of the season. They played each other early on.